The autumn sun hung low over downtown Chicago, and Sarah Mitchell found herself standing at the corner of Michigan Avenue watching the leaves scatter across the familiar sidewalk. 5 months had changed everything. She placed one hand gently on the small but unmistakable curve beneath her coat and took a slow breath. She had left the city in May with nothing but a single suitcase and a heart full of confusion. Now she was back and everything felt both exactly the same and completely different. Sarah had worked as an executive assistant at Henderson Global for 3 years before that night. That one night when the office holiday party had turned into something unexpected. When her boss James Henderson had looked at her not as an employee but as a woman. When the champagne and the soft music and years of unspoken attraction had finally spilled over into something neither of them had planned. She remembered how gentle he had been. How his usual commanding presence had softened into something tender and uncertain. They had talked until dawn in his penthouse office while the city lights twinkled below them. He had told her about his loneliness at the top and about the divorce that had left him wary of connection. She had shared her dreams of opening a small bookstore someday and her fear that life was passing her by at 42. But morning had brought reality crashing back. The awkwardness, the power imbalance, the complications. Sarah had made the decision to leave rather than navigate the impossible situation. She had driven to her sister's place in Wisconsin and spent 5 months helping with the family farm and trying to figure out what came next. Now here she was, back because her sister was doing better and because Sarah had her own life to rebuild. Back because running away forever was not who she wanted to be. She had not told James about the baby. The walk to her old apartment building took 20 minutes and Sarah found herself stopping frequently to rest. Her body was changing in ways that still surprised her each morning. The fatigue, the way her back ached after standing too long, but also the strange and unexpected joy she felt when the baby moved. A flutter like butterfly wings. A reminder that she was not alone anymore. Her landlord Mrs. Chen greeted her with a warm hug and asked no questions about the time away. That was the thing about Mrs. Chen. She had lived 83 years and understood that sometimes people needed space and grace. The apartment was dusty but intact. Sarah spent the afternoon opening windows and wiping down surfaces and trying to decide what to do next. She needed work. She needed a plan. She needed to figure out whether to tell James or simply move forward on her own. The answer came sooner than expected. 2 days later Sarah was at the farmer's market on a Saturday morning selecting apples when she heard a voice she would have recognized anywhere. Sarah. She turned slowly and there he was. James Henderson stood 3 feet away holding a bag of fresh bread and looking at her with an expression of complete shock. His dark hair had a bit more silver at the temples than she remembered. His blue eyes were the same. Searching, intense, kind. James, she said quietly. His gaze dropped to her rounded belly and she watched the realization wash over his face. The confusion, the quick calculation, the dawning understanding. As that, he began and then stopped. Yes, Sarah said simply because there was no point in lying or delaying. They stood in the middle of the market while people flowed around them buying vegetables and chatting about the weather. James seemed frozen and Sarah could see him trying to process everything at once. Can we talk? He finally asked. They walked to a small cafe nearby and settled into a corner booth. Sarah ordered herbal tea and James got coffee he did not drink. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Why didn't you tell me? James asked and his voice held no anger. Only hurt. Sarah wrapped both hands around her warm cup. I was scared. I didn't want you to feel obligated. I didn't want to complicate your life any more than I already had. Complicate. James shook his head. Sarah, that night meant something to me. When you left without a word I thought I had done something terrible. I thought I had made you feel pressured or uncomfortable. I have spent 5 months wishing I could apologize. No, Sarah said quickly. No, you didn't do anything wrong. It was beautiful. You were beautiful. I panicked. I didn't know how to be your employee and also be someone you had feelings for. And then when I found out about the baby I convinced myself it would be easier for everyone if I just handled it alone. James reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was warm and steady. I have made many mistakes in my life, Sarah. I have been so focused on building a business empire that I forgot to build a life. But that night with you reminded me what it felt like to connect with another person. To be seen for who I really am and not just for what I have accomplished. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. I'm 42 years old, James. This wasn't part of my plan. I never thought I would be someone's mother. I spent so long thinking my chance had passed. And I'm 51, James said gently. I never thought I would get another chance at any of this either. My marriage ended 10 years ago and I resigned myself to being alone. But maybe we both get to write a different story than the one we expected. Sarah wiped her eyes with a napkin. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to be part of this. Part of your life and part of this baby's life. Not because I feel obligated but because I want to. Because that night wasn't just a moment for me. It was a glimpse of something I had given up hoping for. They talked for hours in that cafe. About practical things like prenatal care and work arrangements. About fears and hopes and the messy, complicated reality of bringing a child into the world. About what it meant to start over when you thought your path was already set. James did not offer grand romantic gestures or promises of perfection. He offered something better. Partnership. Presence. A willingness to figure things out together one day at a time. As the afternoon light slanted through the cafe windows, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Not everything had to be perfect. Not everything had to follow a plan. Sometimes life surprised you with gifts you did not know you needed, wrapped in circumstances you did not expect. I'm still scared, she admitted. Me too, James said. But maybe we can be scared together. They left the cafe as the sun began to set and walked slowly through the autumn streets. James insisted on carrying her bag of apples and Sarah found herself laughing at his awkward attempt to be chivalrous. Some things did not change. He was still trying to take care of everyone around him. But now she understood that underneath his commanding business exterior was a man who longed for connection and family and the simple human comfort of not being alone. They were more alike than different. Both of them had spent years building walls around their hearts. Both of them had forgotten that vulnerability was not weakness but courage. Over the following weeks they moved carefully toward building something new. James accompanied Sarah to doctor appointments and listened with wonder to the baby's heartbeat. Sarah accepted his help while also maintaining her independence and dignity. They were not rushing toward marriage or any particular destination. They were simply learning to trust each other and to believe that good things could still happen even when the timing seemed all wrong. Sarah's sister visited and approved of James after a single conversation over Sunday dinner. Mrs. Chen quietly smiled whenever she saw them together and said nothing but clearly saw everything. The leaves turned gold and red and then fell and the city prepared for winter. On a cold November evening James and Sarah sat in his penthouse office where it had all begun. She had her feet up on the couch and he was reading a book about fatherhood that made him alternately laugh and look terrified. Do you ever regret it? Sarah asked. That night, all of this. James set down the book and came to sit beside her. He took her hand and placed it over his heart so she could feel it beating steady and strong. Not for a single moment, he said. You gave me back something I thought was lost forever. Hope, connection, a reason to come home at night. I am grateful for every unexpected turn that brought us here. Sarah leaned her head against his shoulder and felt the baby move between them. This was not the story she had imagined for her life. It was better, messier and more uncertain but also more real and more full of grace than anything she could have planned. Sometimes kindness arrives when you stop demanding that life follow your script. Sometimes love appears not in grand gestures but in quiet moments of choosing to stay and build something together. Sometimes the most important question is not whether the timing is perfect but whether you are brave enough to accept the gift when it arrives. Sarah closed her eyes and listened to the sound of James breathing beside her and the city humming far below and the future stretching out before them full of possibility and promise and the beautiful uncertainty of new beginnings.